Welcome to the first episode of The Bolt 2026.
With not a better guest in sight.
Oh. Welcome, Kelly.
Thank you.
Our Chief Strategy Officer.
Happy to be here. Can't believe it's taken this long.
Glad you're here. This is episode 4, I think, officially.
Of the video format.
Of the video format. So today we're going to talk about media and its intersection point with the customer journey and how we philosophically think about all that. So I'm going to come out with a question.
With a hot take? With a question?
Just a question. We'll see if it leads to a hot take.
All right.
The funnel. Is it dead?
I don't think the funnel is dead, but I think the funnel is very different than what it used to be. And thinking about the traditional funnel needs to be adapted based on a much more segmented and fragmented customer journey than what we saw 5-10 years ago. As far as kind of how does a user make a decision, there's still the awareness, the consideration, and the purchase. Is that sped up? Are there different interaction points? Like, of course.
Yep.
But I think that the true nature of a decision-making process, whether that's a purchase, intent to purchase, whatever that is still the same. I think we still plan that way. You know I'm a rambler, so I'm just going to go. We still plan that way from a strategy perspective, right? And understanding where the client is today, where we want them to be, what's the objective of the campaign. We have to understand, are we trying to drive awareness? Are we trying to increase education? Is this more lead gen focused? Because we've already checked those 2 boxes. And then, yes, there are tactics, there are platforms, there are approaches that we would apply from a strategic perspective in order to help get them to that next stage in the journey faster. I think another use case of the funnel not being dead is thinking about like technology, right? Lead scoring models, CRM, SaaS platforms, they're still so built around the traditional funnel model and driving towards the next stage of the purchase. I think it would be hard for anybody to make the argument, maybe you can, that the funnel is truly dead.
Yeah, I don't know that I think it's dead either, and I think you're right that it's not so much that it's I don't think it's that it's gone away. I think that, if anything, it's gotten much wider in the sense that there's a lot more one can do once they're in the funnel. When I think about it, I think there's also, if you were to challenge anything about the current way that we talk about the funnel, there's one way in, and the only way out is through the bottom.
Yep.
I would argue there's multiple ways in now, right? The funnel is not just open at the top. It's actually open at the sides as well. And I could be the kind of person who's considered the purchase of a new phone for a while, and I just happen to be in the right space of the right headspace. I'm sitting on my couch. It's 9 o'clock at night. There's nothing going on. I open Instagram. There's an ad for that phone I've been thinking about. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to buy it.
Yeah.
But I would still argue I still was in some form of that funnel. So whether or not the visual is being adapted in different ways or not, I think conceptually the premise remains the same.
It's just not as linear, I think, right? Like we used to think about it as just one phase in, and then you have to trickle through all phases in order to get to the output.
Yep.
But I think now, to your point, like it's super specific to industry. It's specific to product. Like how many times have we fallen victim to an Instagram ad? I wasn't in any way in the awareness or consideration of buying this product, but it's cool. It's relevant to me because of the way that they've set up the targeting, and I buy it immediately. And I go through that awareness, consideration, purchase decision within 10 seconds.
Yeah.
So I think that that's a super, visible model that a lot of people can relate to around how it's changed.
Yeah. I think one of the things I find interesting in that, or maybe I'll ask it as a question.
Yeah.
When you think about that version of the funnel, it's more nuanced yet complicated, spiderwebby kind of elements at times. Again, I think we share the point of view that it still fills into a funnel-like process where I'm going through an initial point of awareness, through consideration, through conversion, then post-loyalty. Like those elements are the same. Again, at the risk of repeating ourselves, perhaps I can get into them, or I can accelerate through them much faster than I could before. I could skip a step where maybe that wasn't as typical before. How do you think about that in terms of how you reconcile media in terms of the role of a tactic that might be more awareness focused, more top of the funnel, versus elements that we would say are more conversion focused or more retargeting and follow-up focused? Like, how much has that changed in your mind?
Like so much and not at all at the same time, right? I think like AI has changed the awareness piece of the puzzle. People used to do so much research, and that typically was on, if we're talking modern day, right? Like that typically is happening on a search engine. And now that's just not true anymore. I mean, we've seen so much of that research be reallocated to AI. And then the stat that we're using to, you know, inform our clients about it is that a user is 4.4 times more likely to convert on your website if they came from AI. They're so trusting of the recommendation of AI's combination of sources that when they arrive, they're ready to go.
Wait, so let me interrupt for a second. Yeah. I think this is, we made it a few minutes before we got to AI, and here we are on AI.
Good for us.
I think it's interesting. So I want to dig in a little bit to this notion of,
and then I'll circle back to answer your actual question.
Users who are more likely to convert at what rate coming from AI? So 4.4 times more likely. I have consulted with ChatGPT. It's given me a recommendation. I'm almost buying it at face value anymore, in a way that I used to use Google search, and I would filter through listings. I might go to 3 or 4 pages, and I might go to Reddit and look it up, and then I would go read a review and weigh that in. And then I was still in that mode as a user. I'm saying me, but just the average user, any of us. We were still in that mode where I was consuming information so that I could filter it and then come up with my point of view, and then I would act on that decision, right? And so maybe use a shoe example. Now it tells me that Nike makes the best running shoe. Here's the one I should get. I click in. I want the yellow ones. I buy them. I'm done. Whereas before, I might have looked at the On Running shoe versus the Nike shoe versus the Aloe shoe, whatever, right? And so I'm bouncing between sites, and so it's not a surprise to me. All of that to say, I am curious your point of view or what the data tells us around. Certainly Google has its like little AI kind of thing, that widget that appears at the top of the page. I don't know that I trust that the same degree I might trust a conversation with ChatGPT as an example. Is there any data or is there any user behavior we're starting to see where different tools are providing more of that confidence to the end user?
I think it's super dependent on the individual, right? Like, I think if you talk to someone who's maybe not as involved in this space as you and I are, they have an LLM that they turn to. They're probably not using a combination of the tech stack, right? So I think that they turn to what we're seeing, just high level, right, is that if I want to conduct the research, I will still turn to a Google, a Bing. If I want an answer, I'll turn to Chat. And they're like an advisor, right? And it removes some of that decision fatigue. I think it removes, we're so fast paced in our environment today that being able to get to that insight without the manual human input of, let me go to these 3 different websites, let me assess the price differences in all of these running shoes, what style do I like best? Because it's really just an answer to what's the best running shoe for me. And I've put those inputs in, then I'm going to trust, you know, what is returned back. So I think that that's kind of more of the mindset is search engines are exploratory, and then LLMs are more for an answer-based response.
Interesting. Did we not close the loop on the rest of that question previously?
I think what you were asking about is kind of like the multiple ways in the funnel, and then how people get into it and how we think about like our strategic approach to what platforms fit with each.
All right, so let me reset up that question again then, so that Lauren can figure out how to make all this make sense and take out your sarcasm. The question was around how we think about the role of media tactics throughout the funnel. All right, so let's circle back to the previous question then. As we think about the role different media vehicles might play, I think it used to be very traditional, right? Like you would say programmatic's for top of the funnel, and the way that like a search ad is more bottom of the funnel. How much has that changed in this more nuanced way that the funnel is working today?
So much. And like, not to go off tangent again, but I will circle back. I think that some of that is so dependent on the way that targeting is set up within certain platforms. Like, you used to be able to turn to Facebook before it was Meta and get very granular around your targeting capabilities. Because of privacy laws, that's just not the case. Whereas I feel like tools, programmatic, contextual targeting that's built into that, the retargeting options that are built into that, I think that programmatic can offer some of our most granular targeting opportunities. So whereas clients have, or we have traditionally from a media planning standpoint, looked at programmatic as being this top of the funnel only tactic, I think it can still serve that, but I think it can also get very focused in on making sure that as a user is moving through the customer journey, we're continuing to engage with them and drive them forward in that purchase decision-making process. Circling back to your question around like, how has that changed? I think that all platforms can really play a role no matter the area of the funnel, right? You mentioned Reddit earlier as a platform. We've seen Reddit play across the funnel from an awareness standpoint, getting visibility within kind of micro chats and conversations where otherwise that product, that brand wouldn't be mentioned at all. And we're making that introduction. Yep. And because you're in such a niche environment of people you're trying to target, that awareness is maybe stickier than seeing a banner ad on the website. So I think that it comes down to targeting, it comes down to platform capabilities, and it comes down to what's the core objective that we're trying to achieve from a media standpoint that really reframes then how do we reach as little media waste as possible while trying to then drive whatever that intended action is.
Yeah, it's hard to not smile a little bit about this notion that the more things change, the more they really stay the same, right? I think we've touched on this in other episodes of The Bolt where it's, AI was coming for advertising, and yet advertising became the way AI is going to monetize itself, right? But I think in there is an interesting topic for us maybe to dive into around, I can't help but feel like there are parallels between the way like a website like Reddit works in terms of I can advertise to a very specific community. I know that I'm talking to a particular car group who are enthusiasts for a very specific brand. And I'm in that and I'm in a thread that's talking about maintenance issues, and I happen to have a company who makes products that help solve for that. Like, it's so specifically targeted that we are meeting people where they are and putting messaging for brands in front of them, not in a traditional advertising way of being disruptive and taking your time and please watch this interstitial about this basketball team you don't care about before I get you to this WebMD article about whether you're sick and dying or not, right? Like it's kind of been the way that advertising is. It takes your time rather than adds value to it. And I think what we have been able to start to get to is with data and the tools available, we're able to really make sure brands are appearing in front of users when they need them most. And I think AI to me is such an opportunity in that space where I might poke fun of AI because some of their leaders have come out and said they're here to take advertising away from us. But then they turned around and they used it to pay for the tool itself. It's how they're going to generate revenue. But I think it's a huge opportunity because just imagine the most like nuanced conversation you've had with your favorite LLM about whether it's a vacation you want to go on or the running shoe example we just had or anything else that we've all consulted with it about. That's what incredible value that is for a brand to be able to put themselves in that moment and say, hey, I know you're looking to go on vacation. Have you explored the montage in that destination, right? And like, oh, no, I haven't, and I'm very interested now, right? And this is exactly in the point of the funnel where maybe I went from awareness and I accelerated right down to conversion. Talk to me about how you think about that when we are putting those sorts of programs together for our clients.
I think something to keep in mind is authenticity, right? Like when we go back to the mindset of when do I turn to a search engine versus when do I turn to AI, what we do from an organic standpoint in AI is look for optimization in brand reputation and overall visibility. And as much as we can do to drive upward trajectory of both of those key metrics, that's how you get that organic placement. I still think that is massively valuable, not to discredit the media that we do from an advertising standpoint, but like, as much as a brand can provide value on its own unpaid, I think that's still an absolute key. So thinking about the integration, the data, the presentation of an ad through AI, yes, it could be super helpful, but how much, and I think that we'll come to find out some of these metrics in 2026, how trusting are users of that result when it is AI driven versus inquiry driven? And how many, because then we don't even know really how that platform is going to be built out, how that's going to change over the next few months. How many responses are we going to get? Sponsored results on Google, it's like top 10, right? So, now do I feel more confusion? Because what I used to come to this platform in order to get like an end result recommendation, is that presented alongside with sponsored results? Like, I think that's all still yet to be finalized, and we'll probably continue to iterate. But I think that we will lead clients around conversations of making sure that when we're showing up, it's authentically because we deserve to be there. Because I think then that circles back to the organic side of things, of brand reputation and visibility. And if we're offering ourselves as the solution to their need, their research, then we should be right. Because I think that goes back to if the funnel is dead, it's kind of more in that feedback loop model that a lot of marketers are turning to, is like the new funnel, where advocacy, retention, repurchase become signals of really strong kind of brand continuity. And I think that we have to tap into that genuine nature of when a client shows up to make that true.
I want to underscore, though, we both agree the funnel is not dead.
No, the funnel's not dead.
It's changed. It's widened, and I can maybe insert myself into that process at different points than I could before. And I think a comment we touched on a moment ago, I can also accelerate through it much faster than I ever could before. All right, I want to dig in a little bit on this notion of authenticity. As you were talking, I started to think you can already feel it, and I don't want to tread into political waters or biased waters in that way, but you can already see kind of people who are organizing themselves into, well, I trust OpenAI. I don't think it's biased. I trust Grok. I don't think it's influenced by your data.
Right.
Like, there's almost AI's promise, in my opinion, was always it was just objectively true. Mm-hmm. And I think whether it is or not, let's put that aside. I think there are users who will doubt the authenticity of the information from one platform or another, based on who they think is behind it, or what incentives its ownership group has, or which country is providing the data for it. And I think that's a global comment. That's not like unique to like U.S. users, for example, right? You could see people outside of the U.S. say, well, that one's made by a company in the U.S. I don't trust them. The same way like AWS gets beaten up in Europe for how it handles data in those markets. How do we think about that? Or how would you advise brands who say they're concerned about that association? Or how do you think about that through the context of, if a brand is inserting itself into that? I guess what I'm getting at is, does this just become another algorithm?
Yes.
Right.
I mean, 100%. I think that brands, users, people, whatever we want to say, right? Like they should be weary of taking results as, true blue. Absolutely. No questions asked.
Said it, so it's true.
We know that AI hallucinates. We know that it can't do math without a calculator. Like, we just know some of these things. And I think some of that is known because we're so close to it. But I think that users should think about, like, something I've started to ask AI is like, tell me all the sources that you've pulled. Something that, rose to the top for me, we do a lot of social listening for our clients on the organic social side, and the amount of filters that you can apply in something like a brand watch to like make this time, capsuled. I'm only looking for results from Q1. I'm only looking for results in the US, or that mention the exact brand name, right? Not something similar, not misspelled. I think that so much of that goes into the wide cast net that AI looks at in order to return results. So I think it goes back to that authenticity, that the genuine nature of how we're using AI, how we're using it in order to tell a story on behalf of our client or their brands or their products, just to make sure that feels really true into what we're telling the user. So I think that would be the way that I would lead that conversation, is like almost a creative campaign exercise, right? Like,
right.
But is it?
Right.
Yeah.
No, I mean,
Can you say that? Is that defensible?
Because we spend all of our time talking about AI through the lens of like it creates visuals or the content it produces visually.
Yeah.
And I don't know that we spend enough time thinking through that same level of accountability on the content it produce in words.
Right.
Right. And I think some of the brand safety that's going to have to be discussed is, if you're a brand, much the same way. I remember back in my day, like we had like media blacklists where it was like, I want to advertise this brand on this programmatic platform.
We still do.
But we don't want to be on these specific websites. We don't want to appear next to content like this. And there's almost like people were taking it so literally that if this brand appeared next to this bit of content, they were in some way associated directly with it.
Yeah.
And I think that's the inevitable next watch out with AI and media in particular, is what content did I show up next to? Is that content that is safe for the brand? The same way back in like the 60s and 70s, we had entire roles in agencies who watched TV shows before they aired to ensure, do we want this brand's advertisement appearing at this commercial break moment, or is it going to be bad for the brand? I think AI, to me, and then we can put the AI kind of component of this conversation to the side. It feels like that's the next step, but I think it's important.
I mean, there still are upfronts, right? I mean, they're maybe not in the same way that they used to, but exactly that. Like, is this content that I want to, that will align with my, user set or with my brand's belief system? I think brands are still right to think that way, but I think it does add a layer of filtration, right? If your brand is right for a person who's exploring a website that maybe you don't want to endorse, but it's the right opportunity to connect with them, would you not?
No, I think that's 100% right. And I think it's part of the reason why this conversation, to kind of bring it back to this notion of the funnel, is a topic of discussion, because, again, we've said it already, but you can accelerate so quickly, especially when you use your 4.4 times metric around how much more likely people are to convert, because they're putting that much trust in those platforms. So it seems to me, and I know we're already doing it, but for the sake of conversation, like, that is such a worthwhile thing for everybody to be talking about, for clients to be thinking about, on the brand side, for agency partners to be thinking about. How do we think about AI in that lens? What is it doing to that funnel? And then if I know that I have the opportunity to drive people to conversion much faster, and I'm a brand who's really got those metrics as part of my DNA, that I want to get people to the website and I want to get them out and I want a conversion because they've got this e-com component, that is a meaningful part of the media mix going forward, and it has certainly implications on how you think about the role each tactic plays in the funnel. Because I think, and I think you agree, that the days of this media is for this part and this media is for this part, that's absolutely dead.
Yeah.
And that changes so drastically by segment, right? I mean, I know and talk about this, but like, we have clients who we still call trade rags and place print ads with, because it is a meaningful part of that overall media mix. It plays an important role. Whereas there may be other categories where that is kind of a thing of the past, but really understanding the role each media tactic is going to play and what we want it to accomplish, perhaps as a higher level calling than just where it fits in that decision funnel.
Yes, and I would not call them rags as much as publications, because that's how we have an average of 30% discounted rate on any trade publications booked through Ammunition. But aside from that, I think that as a brand leader, I would push my team to say, instead of what's working within the awareness, consideration, conversion funnel, and say, what is the customer journey, the typical customer journey for someone coming through AI versus someone coming through programmatic versus someone coming through social? And how do we optimize that in order to meet the user demands and kind of how they're typically flowing? I think that those are the levers that we need to be pulling. Yep. And you mentioned it earlier in our conversation, but a component of the funnel that's really not talked about is loyalty. And again, it's kind of industry specific in the way that you think about loyalty, but going back to the impulse Instagram buy, if I now, make the follow, I repurchase, I post it on my story, whatever, like, now you start to have influencers that are doing it for you, not as sponsored content, but as, just an organic endorsement of your brand. It's so much more powerful than it coming from the brand itself. And when we think about some of the B2B clients that we service, right, like that repeat sale to a professional, you can make over and over time again. Once they have that brand affinity and you're able to hold on to that, that's value, versus looking at what could be considered vanity metrics, even in a conversion, like, what does that action mean if it didn't drive brand adoption in a long term?
100%. Okay, so I was reading an article recently, and I want to build on this funnel conversation, because I think it's hard to unpack the role media plays when we say it could be any part of that funnel that tactic is being inserted to help support. When you also think about, well, what's the message that is where that piece of media is going to play? Like, what are we saying there? How does that relate to where I am in the funnel? I was reading this article that suggested that the notion of a single-minded proposition is dead. And for those who aren't familiar with that phrase specifically, when we talk about that, it's typically like one sentence that's meant to help creative understand, what's this brand stand for and why should I believe it, right? Do you think that the single-minded proposition is dead?
No. And maybe we'll debate this.
Sure.
I understand the article. You shared it with me to help kind of provide some context for this conversation. I get it. I think that yes, in a traditional sense, that might be true, because I think that when we were operating as advertisers and marketers off of the SMP being the North Star, we were typically talking about television, like linear television ads, billboards, print ads that give you more landscape in order to communicate your message. With the fragmentation and the multiple entry points, so many endless amount of kind of communication and touch points with our audiences, it is hard to get all of that into a 728 by 90 banner. And so I think that now we should still use an SMP to make sure that everything we develop returns back to that North Star. But I think it's less prescriptive than it was, where we have to use that exact, phrasing or whatever. I think it's more about maybe the SMP will always remain internal language that guides external executions and how that gets, put into a banner ad versus a print ad versus, a really beautiful 30-second commercial spot. So I think that's my take on that. It's not dead. It just needs to be executed in different ways.
No, I think we're on the same page, especially when I consider, and we've talked about this for some time, this isn't like an all new take, right? And certainly we do with our clients. That you don't need to get the message all in the first piece of communication or the second or the third.
You can't.
It's impossible. Especially when you also acknowledge the fact that user might come in at any point in that funnel, right? Whether it's the 728 by 90 on CNN.com, or it's a full 30-second spot during the Super Bowl, or it's an interstitial on whatever news website I want to go to. That message has to be able to break apart, and to your point, still ladder back to some kind of North Star where every piece I get helps me understand the brand better, regardless of where I got inserted into that conversation. And so
it's more about that like repetition and enhanced visibility and hopefully connected tissue across platforms that helps that SMP come to life, and maybe the users having to put together some of those parts and pieces. And
I don't think it sounds as like messy as maybe it almost is starting to sound. Like, well, messaging is changing everywhere and media changes everywhere and the funnel
and the funnel's dead,
upside down and inside out and whatever. But I think the reality is that's where the technology and the data layer backbone, and I'd like to spend a minute talking about this, really comes to play, because it's not like it's just chaos out there. I mean, built correctly, we understand all of the attribution modeling. We understand the exact user flow each user who converted or didn't went through. We understand how to follow up with them, which media they consumed and interacted with versus the stuff they ignored or didn't interact with at all, even though they saw it. All of that still lives in a very organized, very thoughtful way. It's about how we put those tools together and how we build those dashboards and how we think about the overall messaging meets media meets customer journey meets follow-up strategy meets technology infrastructure, and then the data reporting layer that goes on top of that.
And I mean, another point in the funnel not being dead, you just said it, right? Like the dashboards, the analytics, like they're all built around the funnel, unless you're building a custom dashboard, in which case data used to all live in one place. Now it doesn't. We're connecting 60 different tools in order to present a global dashboard that can be represented for sales versus marketing, for this territory versus that. Like, you really have to curate the way that you're thinking about your data in order to make it be meaningful versus just impressions and CTR. Because at the end of the day, like, those things don't drive outcomes. They're just metrics.
Okay, we're going to try something new.
Oh, God.
I've never closed it out this way, but I think I really liked our hot takes at the end of the year. So in 2026, we're going to try closing each one of these out with a hot take relative to the subject matter. So today we've talked about everything from how we think about the funnel, how we think about media mix relative to the funnel, messaging relative to the media that we're deploying it across, how we think about all of that working in concert together. You can offer one hot take on how we think about, or you think about this very differently. What is it?
I would encourage brands to really embrace authenticity and measurement based on business outcomes. move away from vanity metrics, move away from conversions as kind of like your number one KPI, but think about, even if it's not a clear path, how can we model ROAS? How can we look at how each part and piece of media and advertising programs are circling or laddering back up to those brand and business objectives? Because I think that's how you'll get measurement versus chasing shiny objects of new platforms, new tactics, the latest AI.
Thank you.
Does that count?
It sounded like a good take to me.
Cool.
We'll roll with it.
I feel like maybe our April Fool's thing needs to be ammunition hosting the funeral of the funnel.
We'll talk about that separately.
Okay.